This module will provide an overview of the impact smoking plays on the individual's health and financial impact from both the individual and the nation. Tobacco use remains the single most preventable cause of disease, disability, and death in the world. More than 6 million people per year die from tobacco use across the globe. Cigarettes are responsible for more than 90% of tobacco-attributed death and disease. In the U.S., more than 480,000 deaths per year are attributed to cigarette smoking, including more than 41,000 deaths from secondhand smoke exposure alone. This is roughly 1 in 5 deaths annually, or 1,300 deaths every day. Now, if you need a visual representation, imagine 3 full 747s crashing daily. The life expectancy for a smoker is at least 10 years shorter than a non-smoker. However, quitting before the age of 40 reduces the risk of dying from smoking-related disease by 90%. Tobacco contributes to most of the leading causes of death in the world, and half of all smokers will die from some tobacco-related illness. Smoking tobacco causes exposure to a lethal mixture of more than 7,000 toxic chemicals, including at least 70 known carcinogens that can damage nearly every organ in our body. For every person who dies from a smoking-related disease, roughly 30 more people will suffer with at least one serious illness caused by smoking. Now, globally, smoking leads to 28.6% of all cancer deaths. In the U.S., this percentage is actually higher, affecting 40%, with a leading cause of cancer mortality being lung cancer, accounting for 33% of that 40%. Cigarette smoking is a leading cause of 90% of all lung cancers in the U.S. With prolonged tobacco use, the risk for cancer will continue to rise. When a person smokes, their body becomes less efficient at removing the toxins and dangerous compounds. These compounds can damage our DNA, including key parts that protect us against cancer. In layman terms, chemicals in cigarette smoke enter our bloodstream and can then affect the entire body. This is why smoking causes so many different types of cancer. Now, smoking is the major cause of cardiovascular disease, accounting for 33% of all deaths. Heart disease includes several types of heart conditions. The most common type in the U.S. is coronary heart disease, which affects, again, 1 in 3 deaths. Coronary heart disease is a narrowing of the blood vessels that carry blood to the heart. This can cause chest pains, myocardial infarctions, which is when the blood flows to the heart becomes blocked and a section of the heart muscle is damaged or dies. It can also cause heart failure, when the heart cannot pump enough blood and oxygen to support other organs. Or it can cause arrhythmia, which is when the heart beats too fast, too slow, or irregular. Smoking can also cause strokes, which occurs when the blood supply to the brain is blocked, or when the blood vessels in the brain burst, causing brain tissues to die. Strokes can also be very debilitating, causing paralysis, muscle weakness, trouble speaking, memory loss, or even death. Now, in 2014, the Surgeon General issued a new report, nearly 50 years later after the landmark Surgeon General report on smoking and health. In this report, it stated that there is now efficient evidence to infer that tobacco use is a cause of diabetes. Now, diabetes is a group of diseases in which the blood sugar levels are higher than normal. Now, when we eat food, most of our food turns into glucose and is used for fuel for our body. The pancreas makes a hormone called insulin that helps the glucose get into our cells. Now, there is a 30 to 40% higher risk of developing type 2 diabetes in those who actively use tobacco compared to those who don't. Type 2 diabetes is the most common in adults and accounts for more than 90% of all diabetes cases. In this case, someone with type 2 diabetes means that their body doesn't use insulin properly, which is called insulin resistance. Now, there's a positive dose relationship between the amount of smoking and the risk for developing type 2 diabetes, aka the more you smoke, the higher the risk. Now, if a user already has diabetes, smoking makes managing their diabetes a lot harder, and they're more likely to have serious health problems and complications, including heart disease, kidney disease, poor blood flow to their legs and feet, and neuropathy, which means damaged nerves to their arms and legs. Smoking also leads to 23% of all deaths related to pulmonary disease. The most common is COPD, or known as the chronic obstruction pulmonary disease. This is a chronic lung disease caused by damages to the lungs over a long period of time. Now, COPD requires the diagnosis of two pieces, emphysema and chronic bronchitis. With emphysema, the lung air sacs lose their elasticity and surface area, which makes it difficult to exhale air. This leads to air trapping, aka reduces the amount of oxygen and increases the amount of CO2. After a long period of time, a person who smokes is unable to compensate for these defects and becomes shortness of breath. With chronic bronchitis, the upper airway becomes inflamed and fills with mucus. This can lead to wheezing, coughing, and a waning feeling of shortness of breath. Smoking is the primary cause of COPD, but it progresses silently until at a certain point it doesn't. And at that point, most of the damage is done to the lungs, unfortunately. There's also a causal relationship to smoking and the increased risk for asthma, acute respiratory illnesses such as pneumonia and sinus infections, as well as tuberculosis. Now, in 2016, it was estimated that roughly a fifth of all males and a third of all females globally were exposed to secondhand smoke. Exposure to secondhand smoke can be measured by testing our saliva, our urine, or blood to see if it contains cotinine. Now, cotinine is created when the body breaks down nicotine, found in tobacco smoke. Roughly 25.3% of non-smokers had measurable levels of cotinine in their system, in a recent report in 2012. Now, cotinine levels have declined. However, the levels continue to be high among various groups. Nearly half of all non-Hispanic Black Americans were exposed to secondhand smoke. Roughly 43.2% of non-smokers who lived below the poverty level were also exposed to secondhand smoke. Secondhand smoke remains higher also among those who are in the service and construction worker industry compared to other occupations. Exposure to secondhand smoke is also associated with numerous health effects as well. So there's no risk-free level of secondhand smoke. In adults who've never smoked before but have been exposed to secondhand smoke, they're also likely to be at risk for heart disease, lung cancer, and stroke. And for women, they can also affect reproductive birth as well, meaning that their babies might have a low birth weight baby. Now, quitting tobacco use have benefits at any age. The benefits of quitting almost occur instantaneously, as you can see in this table here. Within the first 8 hours, their O2 and CO levels start to return back to normal. Within 2 days, their nerve endings begin to grow back. Within 2 weeks to 12 weeks, lung functions actually increase by 30%, and they have an improvement in their cardiovascular system. Within 1 to 9 months, their coughing and their shortness of breath also decrease. By 3 years, they have a reduced risk of myocardial infarctions to someone who's never smoked. And within 10 years, their lung cancer rate dropped in half of that of someone who continued to smoke. Most tobacco users become addicted at a young age without knowing the health consequences that tobacco use will eventually inflict upon them in the future. Now, the burden of tobacco falls disproportionately on the poor and is a source of both health and economic disparity. Now, the cost of tobacco use is rising rapidly, with a pack can be as low as $5 in Missouri to as high as $10 in New York City. And as you can see over time, depending on the number of packs you can almost spend $500,000 in your lifetime on tobacco products. The economic cost of smoking globally amounts to nearly $2 trillion each year. This is equivalent to almost 2% of the world's total economic output. The majority of total economic cost of smoking is in loss of productivity of those who have been sickened or killed by tobacco. Another 30% of these costs are related to healthcare-related expenses of treating smoking-attributed diseases. Again, in the U.S., smoking-related illnesses cost more than $300 billion each year, including nearly $170 billion from direct medical costs and more than $156 billion in loss in productivity. including $5.6 billion in loss of productivity due to secondhand smoke alone. Now, increasing the price of tobacco products is the single most effective way to reduce consumption. A 10% increase in price has been estimated to reduce overall cigarette consumption by 3 to 5%. Global tobacco consumption is slowing. This is largely due to many countries implementing successful tobacco control programs and taxation. The next module will dive deeper into understanding why quitting is difficult and the effects of nicotine specifically on the brain and how users become so addictive.